Writing with Sources, Chapter 3 is focused on avoiding plagiarism. And so I just wanted to kind of give you the highlights of what you want to pay attention to as you read this. What I'm doing here is not meant to replace the chapter. You really need to read the chapter. It gives you a lot of really good example scenarios to show you kind of like the situations that produce someone who might choose to plagiarize accidentally or on purpose, so that you can know which ones might be personal problems for you based on your own habits, so that you can avoid that. So it talks about what plagiarism is, and that's just any time you're using information from someone else without citing it. And it can be the actual information, it can be their words, or it could just be like summarized versions of their words, but still information you got from them. It can be like organizational strategies that they use, terms they use. There's all sorts of things you need to give credit for. We covered that back in chapter 1. And the failing to give credit is where the plagiarism comes in. And I want to add one other thing, because this has become a really big problem. Those websites like Spinners that lets you put in your paper and it will randomly replace words to make it harder for plagiarism detection to find it. It is a big flashing neon sign that you've done something not okay when you run a paper through one of those, because it is way obvious when someone reads this that no one wrote it. No human being wrote it this way, because it substitutes words that make no sense sometimes. It'll replace like people's names with synonyms, because that name also happens to be like a common noun. So like say Frank Lloyd Wright, the architect, I had a paper one time where it changed that to Honest Lloyd Wright. Yeah, that was a really big sign that something had gone on there. And students have, sometimes people are using this just legitimately because they think their writing is not good and they're trying to make it better. There's been students I've had who I know are not plagiarizing. They're just really self-conscious about their writing. That is not making it better. So don't use those. But if you have gotten that from a web source, trust me, it only takes me a couple of minutes to still figure out where it came from, because there's certain words that there's really only other one option. From there, you can find the source really quickly. So you're not hiding anything. You are actually drawing attention to the fact that you got this from somewhere else and you don't want safe assign or whatever to find it. So don't do those, okay? If you're concerned, talk to your teacher, whether it's me or another teacher, but please don't do that, because we know when that happens and it's really not making it harder. It only adds a couple of minutes that might irritate us. That, you know, safe assign could have found it. We had to spend 5 minutes. Don't use those. They are not preventing you from plagiarizing either. All it's doing is showing you got it from someplace else and then you had something else do the work to rephrase it. You should still be citing it anyway. But anyway, sorry for the tangent, but those are not helpful. I know a lot of students use them, and I just want to warn you that the professors know about them and they're not gonna hide it very well. So anyway, it is covering in this chapter, you know, reasons why someone might plagiarize, and I acknowledged in that tangent / rant some of those reasons. Like, you might feel like your own writing isn't going to be good enough. It's not always just about trying to get away with something and get out of some work, but I think also you want to keep in mind that if you're not doing the work, it's not fair to the people in your class who are doing the work for you to end up with the same grade for not doing the work. So, I mean, to me, that's my biggest issue with plagiarism, is that it's an issue of fairness, that I have students who are working really hard to do their own work, and I don't think it's fair for someone who didn't do their work to be able to get credit for it, which is why I'm pretty strict about giving zeros if you do plagiarize. So all of that said, consequences is another thing addressed in there, and it could be consequences just a grade. You are also, you know, most of these classes are meant to help you with skills, and if you aren't turning in your own writing, it's really hard for a professor to help you make your writing better if they're not actually getting to look at your writing. So there's consequences to you that you're still never really learning how to do the thing. But then there's, you know, you can get in trouble, and if you plagiarize in the wrong person's class and then they turn you into their department chair or their dean or something like that, it can have serious consequences for you academically, like staying in school and stuff. So, you know, try not to do it. And so this chapter is really meant to give you some strategies to keep you from finding yourself in a situation where you feel like that's your only choice. And so that's what the later part of the section is about. It goes through a bunch of different scenarios. Some of them you're going to be like, this is not me at all. And then there's going to be some that you're like, that might be me sometimes. And it doesn't mean that you necessarily plagiarized. All it means is that he is pointing out these are the situations where people sometimes get desperate enough to do it. And it's not even always on purpose. like borrowing a classmate's paper to help you get started, but then you kind of like do the exact same thing, and you may be getting them in trouble in addition to yourself. So things like that. It's not always clear cut, I'm trying to get away with not doing my work. There's other ways that it can happen. And so the chapter is really meant to kind of give you a variety of situations that might lead someone to plagiarize, just so that you can recognize if you tend to do some of those things, you can be intentional about making sure that you don't cross the line into plagiarism, and maybe plan ahead and things like that. So definitely read the chapter. It's got a lot of really good information that it's meant to make sure that you aren't putting yourself in danger of getting in trouble, having your grades suffer, but also making sure you don't end up in a situation just where you're not getting a chance to learn the things you're supposed to learn in a class because you waited too long and did something out of desperation or whatever. And you don't want to get other people in trouble too if that's part of it. So read the chapter. There are some questions about it. It's not a very long quiz, and a lot of it's really just opinion based. So you read it and then you apply it to your own situation. Which of these do you think might end up being a problem for you, or which of these situations do you think deserves harsher or less harsh consequences, things like that. So it's kind of opinion based, but it really relies on you actually having read the chapter. And if I can tell from your answer you haven't read, you probably will not get full credit, just to let you know. But that is Writing with Sources chapter 3. This is the last chapter out of that book we're going to look at.